Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story has been personally written and edited by myself, DMT. Very nervous about this, guys. I've never released a story of my own to you guys. I hope you enjoy it. Of course, please do let me know down below your thoughts, feedback. It's very much appreciated. It's not finished yet, guys. There is more to this. I'm thinking of making this interactive story so you can decide the outcomes and the endings. But so far we're up to 3 parts, this being part 1. Without further ado, let's get into tonight's story. I'd like to entitle The LBL Type 3. Let's get straight into that. If you are like me, then you grew up in a small country town where everyone knows each other's business. The LBL, a beautiful landscape, breathtaking to many, enchanting to most who witness its natural beauty. But to those who really know what hides within those dense, green forests, those who have also been raised hearing tales of monstrous hairy beasts, shape-shifting demons, whose sole interest is only to consume as much human flesh as they can latch and tear their long black claws into. Fortunately, I had my daddy and grandpa to tell me the stories told to him from his father and so forth. One such occasion, he told me of a friend, a hunter. He said that he was an experienced woodsman who had grown up in the deep woodland of Georgia and then moved to Kentucky as a young man to work on a farm. On an early crisp morning, he headed out before light and took his ATV far into the forest. From where it was found, he had travelled on the ATV nearly 2 miles before getting off and making his way on foot through the thick brush. According to the other farmhands, he was out scouting an area for a tree stand. Now, here is where it gets strange. After he doesn't show up for work the next morning, a few workers are sent to look for him, or the ATV. After many hours, they found the ATV and began tracking him through the thick brush that would snag and whip at their faces. It was almost like a fight of defiance to which the forest wanted to keep its secrets hidden. As late afternoon approached, the men came across a scene of chaos. Broken branches 6 to 7 feet in the air, either side of a now newly made trail. Whatever had torn through here was in a hurry and of nightmare size. Some of the branches as thick as 5 inches in diameter. The forest was silent. The men looked at each other, wide eyes. No words were said for at least 2 minutes. They just stared, waited. "We need to head back now," said one of the men, clearly shaken by this strange and chilling sight before him. At the very moment, something terrifying let out a god-awful howl or roar. It was some distance away, but still way too close for anyone's liking, especially this far and deep into the forest. "Let's move," said the men as they turned tail and started to head back the way they had came. It was now approaching 4:15 p.m. The sun was setting soon. Whatever that was, they did not need nor want to find out. Unsure of whether they would make it out of the forest before nightfall, the men picked up pace. Hearts pounding, minds racing, trying to figure out what the hell caused all that destruction to the trees and brush. More to the point, what in God's name was out here with them? The howling rang out again, this time much closer, and more than one. The entire forest took on a deathly ambience. No animals could be heard, only the wind and their footfalls. Snap, crash. "Oh God!" shouted one of the men who was at the back of the group. As the others turned, his headless body fell limp to its knees before falling upon the forest floor, blood running between the golden and auburn leaves like lava. Ah! Screaming erupted from the group and all of them scattered into different directions. Just then, another cry of agony and silence. Each man choosing his fate with the direction he took. Out of the 6 men that went in search, only one young man of 20 years old returned, speaking of monstrous bipedal creatures with eyes as black as a great white shark's, and powerful muscular bodies, and to top that off, a mannerism that of a serial killer. He said how they had all scattered their separate ways, and whilst most of them ran in a similar direction, he ran in a complete other. To this day, he doesn't know why he did that. Anyway, he managed to break for a small ravine with creek in the bottom. When he got there, he positioned himself in a huge old hollow oak that had fallen many years prior, and here is where he stayed all night. Soon, night had fallen, and the forest was a menacing place to be alone, so young. Surely they will find me, he thought. To make matters worse, he was completely soaked through, and soon the temperature had dropped considerably. Steam bellowed from his mouth as he breathed in the crisp night air. I've got to get out of here, but how? He thought. Suddenly, a scream shattered the night silence. It was close, about half a mile. However, now it was a man's screams. Snap! The struggling and screaming stopped abruptly. Sheer panic pulsed through the young man's body as his heart leapt like a hammer to his sternum. Silence. That sobering and chilling silence was back. Crack, crunch. Oh God, no. Please, no, he said as the sounds of nearby footfall could be heard. It was on 2 feet. It must be one of the workers, he thought to himself. Panic again, as he knew the creatures were close. He decided to creep up and take a quick look out of the log through a crack in the enormous trunk. What stood only 10 to 15 feet away was, in his words, a huge, evil-looking canine creature at least 7 to 8 feet tall, covered in thick jet-black fur. It had hands! Hands, he screamed, with razor-sharp claws that appeared to be 2 or 3 inches long. But what happened next is what still haunts him to this day. As he looked at this monster before him, questioning if this would be his very last moments, it turned its head ever so slowly to face him, and then bared its teeth. Blood and tissue still dripped and dropped from its maw. It slowly raised its hand and pointed straight at him with a sinister sneer across its face. He crouched behind the full security of the fallen tree. His mind raced. Do I run? He thought. No, fuck that. I must be miles from the farm. Do I fight? Then, crack rings out through the forest. The young man turned to see lanterns and folk running his way. But the monster, he thought. He looks and realises that it's gone. Nowhere to be seen. It didn't even make one sound in its retreat. I'm here! I'm here! He screamed to grab their attention and secure his ticket to safety. Unfortunately for him, once the dogman of the land between the lakes has scented you, it is only a matter of time before he will return to finish his business with you. Around a month after the attack on the workers, my grandfather started to work at the farm with the other replacements. Some of the original crew were already gone. Others demanded higher pay. They got it. Within a few weeks of working at the farm, my grandfather had made himself at home and grew closer to the crew. Soon, one night as they cooked pot roast on the fire pit, the terrifying occurrence was raised. They explained what had taken place that fateful night and how easily and swiftly these men were massacred one by one, all except the young man. He had survived, barely. As soon as he was conscious and able to stand, he caught the first train out of the state. With the young man screaming of huge man-like beasts blacker than the night itself, standing on 2 or 4 feet, the smell of death, the remaining farmhands looked at each other, some in complete disbelief, others clearly shaken by his words and pale complexion. Out of the remaining crew that survived, 15 seasoned hunters, only 6 original members remained. As my grandfather heard these stories, he questioned whether it was just them trying to spook him and the other new farmhands. But from the serious, dead stare in each man's eyes, he soon realised that they had seen or heard something very much real, and the land that he now worked day and night was much, much darker, much more dangerous than he had ever considered in rural Kentucky. As he sat, questions racing through his mind, the tree line seemed to almost mock and laugh as it swayed in the nighttime breeze. Soon, it was time to turn in for the night. Early start tomorrow, he thought, as the men headed off to their bunks. Remaining beer dashed onto the hot embers of the fire, sending ash and sparks flying high into the night. If only they had noticed the set of eyes watching them from the brush only a few meters away. They would have had some warning. Who am I kidding? They never stood a chance. Later that night, as the men slept, exhausted from a long day work in the fields and the property, a force of nature lurked and crept ever so silently across the meadow on to the property. Every nighttime critter and bug held its breath and humble chorus as the woods and surrounding land were dropped into a new quiet ambience. A deathly weight had fallen on the land, and everything felt it. It was my grandfather who had awoken first. He described this as the single most shocking moment in his life. A strange noise had awoken him from his deep slumber, and as he did, he could feel his chest vibrating inside and out. It was a growl, then the wet slurping and gasps. "Oh shit!" he shouted as he opened his eyes to a scene of utter violence and gore. Jimmy, who was in the bunk next to him, was in his bunk, eyes wide, mouth open, blood coughing and spitting from his mouth. But it was what was atop of him that really drained the blood from his face. An enormous black wolf-like creature hungrily lapping and chewing into Jimmy's throat with a vigorous, hungry pace. All the while its eyes locked onto my grandfather. Just then, it let out the most tremendous growl as he sat there, speechless, looking around the room, each man's throat cut the very same way, now very much dead. Just then, it stopped its nauseous act of greed and stood slowly to a bipedal position, eyes still locked on my grandfather. Pure terror ran through him like a bolt of lightning. As they say, fight or flight kicked in, and well, he chose both. He grabbed at the oil lantern next to his bedside and threw it just at the creature as it made its move. He rolled himself in one motion off the bed to the floor with a harsh crash. Finding his feet, he grabbed at his Zippo lighter that his father had given him as a good luck present, and he ignited it. The creature was already mid-jump straight for him, let out another howl, but this time it was different. It had pain in it, and it was a mix of screaming and a howl. They collided as the flames rushed up the creature's body, it knocking my grandfather to the cabin floor, where he cracked his head and shattered his eye socket, knocking him unconscious. All he remembers seeing before his unconsciousness gripped him was the creature's screams and it running and crashing through the doorway, its sheer size obliterating the wooden wall that was dwarfed by its sheer enormous bulk. And then blackness. Turns out the farmer heard all the commotion and rushed outside to a scene no man should ever have to witness. Blood and tissue covering the walls, ceiling and floor, thick with claret and flesh. My grandfather, still laying on the floor in a pool of blood forming around his lifeless-looking body. The farmer rushed as soon as he see him laying there, different to the rest. Obviously, he had made an attempt to flee whatever in God's name had taken place that night, on his land, on his watch. This has to stop. It has to end now, he remarked to himself. Now! So, my grandfather was rushed to hospital, and the farm was overwhelmed with authorities all the damn alphabet. Jeez. The tough son of a bitch had 115 staples to his cranium and a serious case of PTSD. He said he would never, ever sleep after that night, in case that son of a bitch wanted more. What a guy. Unfortunately, the farm took on a dismal turn for the worst, as nobody would work there, let alone sleep. Plus, the feds had a lot of spooks patrolling the tree line and land in the forest. Apparently, gunshots could be heard every now and then, with some larger crews entering the forest during the earlier hours of the morning. We're talking like 2 or maybe 4 AM. Some returning in smaller numbers, some clearly injured and on stretchers. Every time, they would bet their asses they would have a visit at sunup. No questions answered, just orders, or really, threats. My grandfather returned to the farm after a short stay at the hospital, where he was met with the old farmer, on his front deck, whiskey in hand, straight from the bottle. This looks promising, he thought. The farmer explained how he had no luck in hiring new hands, how he might as well just give up. He was too old, and too scared, if he was honest, to face this, whatever it is. Creature in an all-out war. With that, he welcomed him home and told him to rest. They would speak in the morning. As the sun rose and the two men enjoyed their cups of coffee, each not breaking the morning's calm essence, time passed and the old man spoke. "Do you think it can be done?" he said. "What?" said my grandfather. "The beast. Do you think it could be killed?" "Oh, well, I don't know," said grandfather. "I had hoped it was long gone after I lit it up like a goddamn candle. I mean, sure, it was definitely hurt, but killing it? I don't know. I really don't know." They finished their coffee and headed to the truck to grab some supplies from town, some 4 or 5 miles away. They arrived in town and headed straight for the hardware store. There, they purchased wrought iron grills for the windows to the property and plenty of timber to secure the property as best as they could. All the while, they was wondering if this was even worth it. After all, it had made light work of the bunk's cabin whilst on freaking fire. Still, they purchased what they could in an attempt to protect themselves and the house. As soon as they left the store and grabbed some lunch in Wendy's, they sat trying to figure out a plan of action. A plan A, B, and C. Hell, the whole damn alphabet if need be. As my grandfather sat eating some bacon and grits with cheese, easy on the pepper, he noticed a couple of men outside who seemed to be arguing or upset. Soon, the men walked into the diner, clearly pale white, sweating and covered in mud. He couldn't help but keep an eye on them, and an ear. As the old farmer sat, also trying to enjoy his lunch, snapping the bacon with a menacing sound, my grandfather listened. As he did, to his horror and disbelief, they were talking in hushed tones, but he could definitely make out the words. Eyes as black as night, cruel and savage beast. It stood on 2 feet. Grandfather said he felt his stomach lurch and blood draining from his face, all whilst the old farmer hungrily snapping his juicy bacon like a carnivorous beast himself, a stark comparison to the dogman, as he would soon learn to call it. The farmer soon noticed the shocked and disbelief in my grandfather's face. He turned to see what he was looking at with such terror written across his face. "Are you good, boy?" asked the farmer. "You don't look well. Do you want to leave?" Grandfather turned to look him in the eyes and said, "They have seen it too." Right then, the old farmer drops his coffee with a loud crash, and the cutlery follows. By the time that the old farmer realised what was happening, my grandfather was approaching the men, and as he did so, he noticed it wasn't just clay and mud on their clothes. No, there was also some blood. Clearly, they had tried to wash away. The 2 strange men noticed my grandfather approaching them fast and turned tail straight for the door. But Grandpa wasn't going to let it slip away that easy without finding out what had happened. He chased after the men, both who now had jumped into their truck and were hauling ass out of the parking lot. Grandpa, hot on the heels in his truck and giving chase. They took the freeway east. It was the exact same direction that the farmer and he had needed to take home. Soon, he was catching up when a rig pulls out in front of him, sending my grandfather off the road and into the embankment brush. "Shit!" said my grandfather as he slams the truck into reverse and backs onto the freeway, bleaching the tyres as he pushed his foot to the floor on the gas and in the direction they had headed. "Come on, come on!" he was screaming as he takes turn after turn trying to spot the damn truck. By now, it's getting near dusk and the light is fading fast. He found himself on a desolate road way back in the country, fearing the worst and near to giving up. A set of headlights catches his attention as he meets the crest of a small hill in the road. Then they turned off. What the fuck? He thought. As he got closer, he realises it's the damn truck he's been looking for, and before they can react, he slams on the gas and parks right across their track, boxing them in. The two men reach for their weapons, but grandfather was a slick old bastard, you see. He had already drawn his ready. "Drop 'em," he shouts. "I just want to talk, okay?" He instructs the men, who now clearly are doing exactly as he says. All three got out onto the soon pitch dark country road. The men begin pleading and talking over one another. "Enough!" said my grandfather. "I know what you've seen. I too have danced with that piece of shit son of a bitch beast. Hell, I set his ass on fire. In turn, he fractured my eye socket and messed me up good. But it's my co-workers, my friends, who really got hit. That son of a bitch chewed each one of their throats out whilst I slept. I ain't nobody's damn chew toy. Not my ex-girlfriend's or this damn creature." The men relaxed and began to introduce themselves. Dee and Riz, two brothers, although neither really looked related, apparently. Anyway, they explained what the hell had happened to them and why they were covered in so much mud, clay and blood. Dee went on to explain that the day before, they and a friend, Brett, had been camping and bow hunting on the north end of the LBL for a week. All was great for the first half of the week, but come that Thursday evening, things drastically and without warning turned into a nightmare. Branches and twigs being snapped or crushed, trees shook violently as the creature lurked and circled them. Soon, their camp kept being rushed or charged by something huge and powerful and fast. They only caught a glimpse here and there, but soon it crashed through the surrounding trees and stood abruptly right in front of them. They stood there shaking as they told grandfather how it roared at all of them, sending hot, rotten breath and drool flying all over them. Silence fell upon the camp, only the campfire crackling and heavy wheezing breath of this huge dogman took as it waited for their response. It didn't have long to wait. They all screamed as it eyed each one of them up and down, but it didn't attack. Not until Brett threw his beer bottle at it, like a toothpick for fuck's sake, and took off running back towards the trail nearby. Dee and Riz, looking at each other, realised it was now their turn as the creature took a huge step forwards towards the two brothers, each jumping to one side to avoid the dogman's dark, sharp claws. Shh! Dee grabbed his younger brother and hauled ass towards the opposite direction. Just before doing so, he kicked the remaining logs of the fire into the face of the now extremely close dogman. With a scream of white-hot pain, the embers burned and hissed as they burned the skin and hair of the dogman. It wasn't much, but maybe it was enough to get them out, get them back to the truck. Sheer terror coursed through their minds and blood. Adrenaline soaring through their bloodstream, feet and hands clawing and grabbing at the land in the pitch-black night, trying desperately to get away from the dogman. As they ran, they soon realised that they were not being pursued. At least, not yet. Dee grabbed Riz and they both tumbled down a small creek embankment to hide and gathered their breath. They found a small natural dugout in the embankment with plenty of hanging foliage and grass to provide some cover, they thought. Hopefully. Soon, it was more than clear. Brett had indeed met his maker, as a shrill but short scream shattered the silent forest and was extinguished abruptly. "Not far," said D. "What the hell do we do now?" said Riz. D, lost in his own nightmare thoughts of what-ifs, etc., snapped back to reality and said, "We run, as soon as sun is up. For now, let's stay here. It's probably our best shots of surviving this damn nightmare." And so, they waited it out. Apparently, those were the longest 4 hours of their young lives. They heard the dogman growling and pacing just above their heads, heard its terrifying howling as it got more and more pissed off that it couldn't find them. At one point, they said it had been moving through the treetops, trying to get a better view of them, but the hanging foliage seemed to be enough in the dark night to keep them covered. They said it moved without even making a sound. Grandfather listened to these men tell their story, not daring to blink or even ask a question as they continued on. "Well, sun came up," said D. "We waited for as long as we could stand it, but we were going crazy, you know," he retorted. Soon, D and Riz crept out of the safety of the hiding place. The cold morning breeze sent chills up and down each of their spines. "We should look for Brett," said Riz. "He's gone already," said D. "But," said Riz. "But nothing," said his older brother, now clearly taking responsibility of his brother's life very seriously. "We need to get back on the trail and back to the truck," said D. The two men headed off to the forest, everything around them still deathly silent, trying their very best not to make too much noise as they paced through the leaves and brush. "Oh God, no!" cried Riz as they rounded a turn in the trail. There, before them, some 20 feet in the tree, yep, you guessed it, was Brett. Well, what was left of Brett. He had been completely torn in half, his insides falling down to the forest floor, bugs and a fox there before them, making the most of this warm, juicy offering. But what really shook them, to their core, their very being, was what was jammed firmly inside Brett's mouth. It was his beer bottle, the very one he'd thrown at the dogman before taking off into the forest. "Fuck this," said D and Riz as they began to quicken their pace to a steady jog, now not caring if it hurt them. They had to move, and now. Eventually, 2 odd hours later, exhausted and cut and bruised from the rough terrain and challenging pace of which they kept all the way back to the trailhead, they found their truck and peeled the hell out of there. Tears of relief streamed down both of the brothers' faces as they finally realised they were safe. For now. That's when they made it into town and hit the diner for some food and drink. Grandfather looked at the men in utter shock that they had made it out of its domain, its home, its kingdom. Speechless as he was, he asked the men to accompany him back to the farm for some supper and a bed for the night. They gladly obliged. That evening, over supper, the farmer, D, Riz and my grandfather were discussing what the hell this dogman could be, and how in hell are they going to get rid of such a cunning, menacing beast. Then the brothers said a prayer for their friend Brett and for his spirit to find peace. Then they all turned in for the night, exhausted from the past few days and nights of pure terror. Where were the damn chickens? Or the coyotes? Again, the night was silent and still. Too still. The sun rose with a warm and foggy morning blanketing the land around the farm. The farmer was up first and woke my grandfather first, then D and Riz. The men all grouped together in the kitchen, sipping steaming hot cups of coffee. "So, boys, what do you plan to do from here?" asked the old farmer, D straightened up in his chair, his brother following suit. "Well, sir, we don't really know," said D. "I guess we could hit the road. I hear there's always work in New Mexico," said Riz. Grumbled the farmer, wiping coffee from his tired-looking beard. My grandfather spoke up, suggesting maybe they could help in fixing the place up and help keeping both their asses alive for a bed and food. Ultimately, making sure that dogman was on limited time. Scores needed to be settled. A debt was due. The farmer frowned as he thought of the idea. Did he have a choice? It was coming for them. He knew the stories were true. He had seen it up close already as a child. "Well, boys, I sure could use your help. And you can have free run of the entire property for hunting or whatever you need," said the old boy. D and Riz, looking at each other, nodded, then said, "You got yourself a deal, sir. We're scared as you are, but I'll be damned if this son of a bitch..." D and Riz, looking at each other, nodded and then said, "You've got yourself a deal, sir. We're scared as you are, but I'll be damned if this son of a bitch runs us off of our land." And with that, the men felt for the first time in a long while they had a genuine chance at surviving this creature's wrath. Hell, they might even kill it. "Then it's decided then, boys. Welcome to the goddamn family. Keep your hands off my whiskey now." The men finished their breakfast, got washed up and met out on the deck out front. It was still deathly quiet and serene as the breeze flowed through the cornfield like invisible waves. Grandfather, knowing the layout of the property, gave the brothers a tour of the land and explained what had taken place on the week before and the months before that, with the farm hands that searched for the hunter and, of course, never returned. As he explained what had gone on since he had arrived on the property and how the old farmer had found him and the others covered in blood, how each man that went in search for the hunter, only one had returned, telling of monsters, dogmen, cold and calculated killers, shaking as he had when he was laying inside that hollow oak, hearing cries and screams for help and pain. D and Riz sat, mouths open in shock of what had happened and what had been going on around the property. It turned out they worked on a farm about 12 to 15 miles away. It also had the same strange occurrences that never really seemed to make sense, but nothing on the level that grandfather had told them. More livestock slaughtered in dreadful ways never seen before, throats ripped out, internal organs eaten, some placed neatly to one side. They had suspected coyotes, although the injuries sustained were enormous, that of a lion or something otherworldly. Grandfather scratched his head at the news, clearly shocked to hear that the trouble was as far away as that. Then again, wolves have a huge territory, he thought. "Well, now you know what has been happening around here, and it seems like you already have your own debt to settle. Are you going to stick around? Nobody will blame you otherwise." D and Riz, both taking in the vast land of the property and depth of risk they was now taking on, looked deeper into the horizon, unsure if they would live to see many more sunsets at all. The rest of the day was spent securing the farmhouse and rebuilding the wall to the bunk's cabin. As sundown approached, the men felt confident and headed in for supper and a beer or six. That night, around 11:45 p.m, grandfather was washing up the last of the dishes and cups. The splashing of the water was the only sound in the quiet cabin, as each man deep in his own mind trying to understand what the hell was going on and how to kill that son of a bitch. Just then there was a loud bang, and a downright ungodly roar from deep in the forest. The men all stopped instantly what they was doing. The water from the kitchen tap, the only noise left as the terrifying roar slowly died off into the crisp forest night. Silence as grandfather shut the tap off. Drip, drop, drip, drop. Riz shuddered as the noise finally faded. D, eyes wide, already loading and checking the chamber of his 357 Desert Eagle. The old farmer walked into the room and broke the silence with the cock of his spaz shotgun. I always wanted to use these slugs. On the now dusty shell box said the words, Dragon's Breath. Seems only right to light his arse up one more time. Ha ha, said the old boy. The men smiling and getting themselves ready. Just then, loud, heavy footfall could be heard straight past the kitchen window. Then, across the back decking, and an almighty crashing from the chicken coop. Then, finally, the pig pen. As the pig screamed and squealed in terror, the men raced out the back door of the kitchen, round and down to the pig house, crashing and snarling, accompanied by sickening, wet, swiping sounds, as we can only guess was the dogman cutting his way through the defenceless and plump pigs. The men arrived moments later, guns drawn. The pigs squealed, and the chorus of bloodlust and pure animalistic destruction drastically stopped. All that could be heard now was the rapid breathing each man was taking as they came upon the pig house. Then, thump, 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 thump. They could hear it walking the long centre corridor of the pig house, growling and snapping as it did so. Grandfather said he could feel his hands and legs tremble as he heard the hard, heavy footsteps the dogman made. Each of the men looking at each other nodded and moved forward, each one pacing out 10 steps from the other. With a huge crash and roar, the enormous dogman smashed through the south end of the pig house, sending wood and long splinters flying through the air. Grandfather was the closest to it, and didn't hesitate in unloading his .357 into the dogman's left side and upper left shoulder. It let out a scream of agony, but moved without trouble, like nothing had happened at all. The old farmer and the brother followed suit and unloaded their weapons. The old farmer and the brothers followed suit and unloaded their weapons. D with his 357 Desert Eagle, Riz with his M4 carbine. Each man emptying a full clip, then reloading again and burning that clip as well. Silence fell as the roars and screams stopped and their rib rattling ceased to vibrate from the cores of their bodies. Smoke plumed and danced slowly up from the red-hot barrels of their weapons. "Did you see where it went?" shouted Grandfather. "I think it jumped back round the other side," said Riz. "Okay," said Grandfather. "Let's split up and meet round back." "Agreed," said the brothers. "Keep an eye on those treetops, boys. We've already seen how easily he moved through them," said D. The farmer simply nodded in agreement. The men slowly split into pairs and made their way round to the pig house, taking note of every piece of their surroundings, from the ground up into the trees. They paced the outside of the now very quiet large building, listening for any noise or sign. Again, the forest was completely and utterly mute. Not an owl or cricket joined in the moonlight hunt. Hearts pounding in their ears, mouths dry with fear and adrenaline. They paced the outside of the building until they reached the corner wall. Bro, Riz whispered. "For fuck's sake, what?" remarked D. "This is crazy, brother. What are we doing?" said Riz in a visible, shaken state. "I don't know, bro, but these people need our help. And to be honest, I ain't happy with it killing Brett like it did. It needs to be stopped. If not us, then who?" Fuck knows, brother, but the police won't do shit. Now let's light his ass up. Just then, a snap. It grabbed both their attention as they looked down the tree line at the back of the pig house. At first, they wasn't sure what the hell was going on. "Where is it?" said D. "I don't know. I think it's in the trees again," said Riz. "There!" shouts D as he points about 35 metres down the tree line. Sure as hell, one tree is leaning under the huge weight and hardly moves in the fairly strong breeze of the night, whilst the rest are swaying from side to side, but remaining vertical. Just then the two brothers see the old farmer and my grandfather rounding the corner at the other end, obviously completely unaware of the dogman lurking just 10 metres away up the cypress tree. They are too far away to shout and too far to get a solid shot. They must press closer and fast. "Let's move," says D, and the brothers press forward silently, keeping an eye trained on the dogman high in the tree, who now seems to be outwardly trying to get a vantage point on the other men. The brothers quicken their pace, all the while grandfather and the old farmer still are clueless to the apex predator that is drooling some feet away. As D and Riz finally get closer and my grandfather and the farmer see them ahead, something truly chilling happened. As the brothers started to get within a good range, there was a massive and dense thump from the other side which shook the building, followed by the all too familiar thump, thump, thump of heavy bipedal footfall. But now it was on the roof. There were two dogman creatures. D and Riz had no choice but to shout and alert the farmer and grandfather to the dogman's presence in front of them. But grandfather and the farmer were already shouting at them like crazy. It turns out the second dogman was coming up behind D and Riz on the roof of the pig house. Finally, D and his brother realised what was happening as the farmer and grandfather started shooting above the brothers' heads. D, pushing his younger brother to the ground, dived and rolled back away from the building, quickly aiming and firing upon the dogman, still in the tree, but now only a couple of metres away from grandfather and the old boy, who now realised what was happening. With this, each man fired opposite ways, hoping to group up, challenge the two dogmen as one group again. The dogman must have seen it coming, as without further warning, the dogman in the tree leapt out from the burdened trunk, wood chips splintering as its long, sharp claws left the soft bark. With a tremendous launch at such a speed, nobody could have evaded its attack, even if they tried. Grandfather says he knew it before he even looked, heard the agonising yelp and air being knocked out of the old farmer. As he turned his head for a second, still firing at the other dogman on the roof, now joined by D and Riz, he saw the farmer being thrown around like a damn ragdoll, and then slashed and clawed, strips of skin and flesh like ribbons. Grandfather then found himself running straight for them as they rolled around on the dirt, which by now was being painted with dark red pools of blood. He ran up on the farmer's gun, which was packing those badass dragon's breath shells. He picked it up and shouted, "Hey!" Then unloaded 4 times just as it turned to look at him. The incendiary shells ignited on impact, sending flames and peppering its face and upper torso with red-hot shot. It let out an ear-splitting screaming noise and let go of the farmer, who by now had either passed out or was dead. It leapt off him and straight for grandfather as he unloaded 2 more shots into its hind quarter, it collapsing mid-stride. Again, it cried out as grandfather reloaded, and it crawled madly at the ground trying to get back up. But he says he thinks he broke both of its lower legs. Again, he fired, this time unloading fully and then beating its head to a messy pulp. The dogman on the roof, still occupied by D and Riz, taking no notice of the demise of its partner. By now, Riz and D both screaming at grandfather to get his ass over. He snapped back to the situation still unfolding, looked at the farmer, then the brothers. Who do I go to? He thought. "Damn it, man, get your ass over here. We can help him in a minute or we can all die," said Dee. Without further thought, he ran towards the brothers, who by now are pacing back slowly to his direction. The other dogman, now on the ground level and heading towards them with an evil, tooth-bearing grin along its jagged snout. Dee reloading and screaming for Grandfather. Just then, Grandfather takes aim with the spaz shotgun and dumps 2 shells at the creature as it appears to try and leap at the brothers. He hits it straight in the upper side, sending it crashing back in pain, and with an enormous thud, Dee continues his attack as it clambers to its feet, and for a moment they all stop. And look in shock as it stands bipedally at almost 8 feet tall. Apparently, it also appeared to be female. Just then, a huge, deep and long howl or roar ascends through the dark forest, causing all of the men to cover their ears. Grandfather says again he felt his chest rattle. In seconds, the dogman launched itself easily 30 feet into the tree line and through the brush where they lose sight of it. Turning to each other, then back over to the old farmer who lays not moving but rapid breathing motions, clearly clinging to his dear life. They run over with Grandfather grabbing him and lifting him up off the floor, which is now a crimson-coloured dirt. "We need to get him inside now," he screamed. Dee and Riz both agreeing and helping move him back to the farmhouse. "We can come back for that in the morning," said Dee. And the 3 men stumbled and rushed back to the house, completely exhausted and shaken from the madness that they had just seen, up close and personal. Laying the old boy on the long oak kitchen table, the men gathered towels and fixed a tourniquet to the farmer's right leg where there was a 9-inch gash in his thigh, severing his femoral artery. Laying the old boy on the long oak kitchen table, the men gathered towels and fixed a tourniquet to the farmer's right leg where he had a 9-inch gash in his thigh. It severed his femoral artery. He was in and out of consciousness for many hours, but eventually he stabilised. Well, for the time being anyway. During the early hours of the next morning, Grandfather by his side, Riz and Dee watching opposite windows for anything unusual, the farmer came round and opened his old, tired eyes. He looked at Grandfather and started to chuckle. Grandfather couldn't help but laugh back with him, although concerned he did even make it to see sunup at all. The old man spoke but coughed and choked on his own blood, so he pointed to the old book on the kitchen side. Grandfather picked it up. "This? You want the book?" he asked. The old boy nodded with a struggled smile across his wrinkled and time-worn face. He turned it open with a thud on the table. "What is it?" asked Grandfather. The old man began to scribble down words to the page. "Thank you for all you have done in this last year, boy. You have grown to be the son that I never had." The old man coughed again, searching for air between his choking. "This here has everything you will need to know. And for starters, get some more of those shells." Grandfather looked at the farmer, puzzled for a moment. The old man continued. "Read it, learn it, live by it. I never settled and had a family of my own. You boys on this farm was as close as I got. I want you to have the farm and land, all of it. But you have to promise me you will stay and see this out to the end, like me." Grandfather looked at the men and then at the farmer again. I'm shocked, sir. I don't know what to say. Thank you, I guess. But listen, old man, you're not dead yet." The old man, with tears rolling down his cheeks, laughing once more and then wincing in pain and coughing again, pushed the strange, heavy old book towards my grandfather, looking him in the eyes and nodding. Dee and Riz made their way over and sat nearby. Grandfather explained what had happened and asked the men if they would too continue to stay, continue to fight. Riz, looking at his older brother, almost for approval of the idea, then, nodding his head and remarked, "Yes, sir." Dee, also doing the same, but said, "On one condition, old man." Grandfather nodding in apprehension of what he might say. "You let us get at that old stash of fine-ass bourbon you keep hiding with him." Ha 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 ha! And they all laughed. And with a couple of shots laid out, they drank a toast with the old farmer. To the farm and kicking some ass. Keeping watch over him until the next morning, whilst the brothers rotated watching the windows through the night. Again, the early hours were far too quiet, and a thick fog had rolled in. All they could do was watch and wait. The early hours passed without further incident, but the strange, silent ambience remained like a cloak of misery across the land. The brothers stayed to help keep watch, and the old farmer went to hospital first light with grandfather, where he was immediately rushed into theatre for emergency surgery to close his wounds. Things still very touch and go. Grandfather returned to the farm later that afternoon. The brothers Dee and Riz were waiting on the front deck as he pulled up to the house on the dry, dusty driveway. Grandfather updated them on the farmer's condition and they, of everything they had found around the property, including the now very dead and bludgeoned dogman they had round back. "Show me where," said Grandfather, and the men all headed around the side of the house to the rear. They had it under some tarpaulin half in and out of an old chest freezer. "You need to see this," said Dee, pulling back the cover. Already the smell was insane and made all of the men retch with nausea. A combination of grassy wood, cross urine and rotting meat. You get the picture. Riz grabbed at the enormous clawed hands or paws. It was a mixture of both apparently, but still very human-like. "Look at the claws! They got to be every bit of 4 inches long," he shouted, with an astounded look on his face. Dee also pointing out it has opposable thumbs. "We have heard of this type of thing growing up down south," said Dee. "The old folk around town would speak of a cunning and tremendous hunter of the forest, part wolf spirit, part man. Its speed and intelligence and wrath unmatched. Its only real threat was man, us. They called it the dogman. Others called it a booger. My granddaddy called it the devil. But whatever it's called, they killed some, but in the process lost many men, women and children," said Riz, with Dee nodding in agreement. "You see those thumbs there?" said Dee. "Well, that means they can open doors, windows, everything. That's if they don't just crash through anyway," said Dee. "This is the first time we have ever encountered one, let alone 2. And what the hell made that howl that called the female back so fast?" said Dee. Grandfather, studying the dead carcass from head to toe, looked at the brothers and said, "I too grew up hearing folk talk about missing hunters, whole herds of livestock slaughtered in one night. But I thought it was just that. Just talk, you know." He said it as he scratched his head at the vicious-looking beast. Now, in the daylight, they could see the muscle mass. It had huge shoulders and long, thick arms, legs straight like that of a man, but with huge, digitigrade feet, again armed with those formidable claws. "I tell you what that was making the howl last night. It was him, the alpha. The very one that planned on eating my throat, but instead got a face full of fire," he said with a venomous tone to his voice. "Yeah, he must be their pack leader. This one here is what, 7 feet? That other bitch was 6 feet at least. But he's a whole nother level. He has to be 8 or 9 feet tall and 4 wide. This isn't over yet," said Grandfather. Eventually the farmer pulled through, but was in bad shape for the rest of his life, ultimately losing his life to a stage 4 cancer. Grandfather by his side the whole time until his passing. The brothers kept their word and stayed at the farm. Together with Grandpa, they put up floodlights at all 4 corners of the house, about 10 metres out, and also they built stronger defences around the perimeter of the land, particularly around the forested tree line, ever aware of watchful, glaring eyes lurking around the darkness of the forest. Occasionally they would stop and listen as a break in the normal natural chorus would cease, as a branch snapped within the foreboding woodland, followed by the sounds of heavy footfall crashing off into deeper forest. Each time they would pack up what they could, calmly make their way back to the ATV or trucks and head back to the house, or they would work in another area on the vast land. At night, everything would simultaneously stop its chirp or hoot. The livestock on the farm had become almost pointless to keep, as they would be slaughtered within weeks of arrival. Each time, the head of a cow or a pig staked abruptly in the front yard, right in front of the decking. Each time, Grandfather or the brothers would return it to the tree line north of the house, with an arrow through each eye, then empty a clip or two into the woodline. It didn't help, nor do anything, but it made them feel better, I guess. Things slowly grew better and seemed to calm down a whole lot more for almost 15 years. That's where I come in. Haha, yeah, I was an ugly baby. Big ass head, long ass legs. They would come in hand though, later on in life. I can tell you. Anyway, Dad met a lady, my mum Susan, and they hitched up pretty quickly and she shacked up at a house. And then they had little old me. Now, let's fast forward 7 years. Dad and I were out back enjoying the sun. He sat me down and basically explained why we always stayed out of the forest and didn't go camping. I continued to ask if we could go at least once, at least camp outside the house. In a testament to being part of every boy's childhood, Dad looked over at Riz and then Dee, both watching my dad think the idea over in his head. You just said it's been so many years since you last see them, or him, right, Dad? I questioned. Dee went to cut in, but before he could, Dad spoke up and told me I was right. It is something each boy should enjoy as a child, and with a forced smile on his face, he said, well, that's decided then. We can camp out next weekend. I'm sure I heard Dee or Riz try to suggest something, but Dad, again, cut him short. With a pat on my head messing up my hair, he got up and carried on working. All the while, the hot sun breathing down and on already scorched and dry dirt, dead grass swaying in the occasional breeze. Dee got up to go and speak with my dad, but kept his voice low, as not to alert me to what was being said. Riz, keeping an eye on me, smiled and said, well, little man, you think you're ready to camp out for the night? I straightened up and declared, oh, I'm more than ready. My dad is the toughest guy around and I'm going to be even tougher. Ha ha, laughed Riz. Well, okay. Sounds like you do got yourself ready. That week flew past at an incredible pace. Before I knew it, it was Thursday evening. I had my dinner and did my chores, last of which was to feed the dogs out back. It was just getting near dusk and the sky had that incredible orange to reddish glow, mixed with streams of velvety blue and wisps of white. The trees had just started to have that silhouette appearance to them. Anyway, as I made it to the feeding bowls just off from the back decking, I heard it. First it was quiet, like a squirrel or a damn turkey, dashing through the brush with odd twigs or larger branches and underbrush crushing under footfall. But it was hard to tell at first. I kept an eye on the tree line, already nervous after what my dad had explained the weekend before. It seemed to act sneakily, which really started to frighten me, as every time I took a step forward or poured the dog food into the bowls, it was moving, But then, as soon as I stopped, it stopped. The hairs on the back of my neck and arms stood on end like electricity surging through me. Out of nowhere, I was terrified to move, to look up again. The now dark sky was getting darker by the second. I heard Dee's voice from inside the house by the back door. Matt! Matt! Come on, you little shit. Time to get washed up for bed. Snap. Leaves rustled. The underbrush broke and there were stems cracking or something. As something large and black as the night emerged from the tree line just 20 meters away from me. From my right, its shadow suddenly cast across the yard and right in front of my feet. I froze as it rose up further in front of me, its huge canine ears and long arms clearly visible as the floodlight above it cast its enormous and monstrous shadow across the yard. "Matt!" shouted Dee, now clearly worried. Finally, as it moved closer, I could see it out of my peripheral. I screamed, "I'm here! I'm here!" I said. Dee burst through the back door of the house as I ran as fast as I could, all the while thinking, "It's gonna eat me! It's gonna eat me!" Dee laughed as I came charging up the steps of the deck, dog food sack half ripped and half empty, the food like a trail behind me. "Ha ha! You sure you want to camp out tonight?" I looked over to the spot where it was, and before I could say anything, I noticed it. It was gone. Just a long branch and brush bouncing as it had made its way back into the forest. "Come on," said Dee, and we went inside to get washed up and ready for bed. The whole time, I never said a word. I even questioned if I imagined it, if that was just all in my imagination. But deep down, I knew it was very, very real. And tomorrow night, we're supposed to be camping outside. That night, I tossed and turned, having terrible dreams of monsters dragging me off into the deep, dark forest. And it all seemed so real. The emotions, the fear. Maybe I should speak to my dad, I thought, or maybe Mum would be better. Later, in the early hours of the morning, around 4:30 a.m, as the sun was not quite up, there was a loud thump, followed by 3 more, on the roof of our house. It was now very clear. I did not imagine it. And it is right above my bedroom. The night the dogman thumped his way across my house roof until stopping directly above my bedroom was a moment I have struggled to forget for the rest of my life. Most nights as I lay in bed, I could still hear its heavy breathing and inquisitive vocalization as it searched for what I can only guess as an access point, or rather, a weakness in the roof. As I lay there, listening to its unnatural moans and snorts followed by the heavy thumps of its feet, I could hardly breathe and my body shivered uncontrollably with fear and adrenaline. I just hoped it would go away. Get bored, leave. Well, it didn't. No. It decided to start scratching at the roof, and soon it was lifting whole tiles off with one swipe of its clawed hand. As it did so, I swear I could hear it almost laughing, like a hyena would with its pack as they hunt. There was a definite excitement as it clawed and began smashing its hands into the now weakening roof. Plaster already beginning to fall to my legs under the bed covers. Sheer panic caused me to scream like I never had before or since. "Dad! Dad!" As I did so, the dogman howled, drowning out my screaming, and my chest rumbled, just like Dad had said. I had to move, and now. I sprang out of bed, quicker than a prize buck on the first morning of the hunting season, running for my father's bedroom. I didn't even make it out of my room before Dad was at the bedroom door, gun in hand. He took one glance at me, and then the ceiling. He grabbed me and pulled me behind him, backing us away, and began firing his weapon at the now cracked ceiling, with dust and plaster now falling in chunks, littering my dark
blue bedroom carpet. I could hear my mother screaming for us to come. "Hurry up, hurry, hurry up," she screamed. Dad, fearing for my safety, scooped me up under his arm and we raced downstairs, to which Riz and Dee both met us at the front door. The crashing and scratching sounds from the dogmen ceased noticeably as soon as we touched the last step of the staircase. All that was left was my mother's sobs and Dad reassuring her everything will be okay. "It's coming down this side," shouted Dee. "Let's move now," he shouted again. You could hear the dogman's claws clacking against the house as it climbed its way down, and then there was a thud. It had jumped whatever was left and now was on the grass outside. Riz running over to the window and firing off a few rounds at it, and then it turned and roared as it took a look at him. Hands and arms out wide, claws extended and panting a long, heavy trail of steam from its open maw. We could all see it perfectly this time. As it stood in the white spotlights, nobody moved. Dee began whispering to his brother to back away slowly. Riz and the dogman in an apparent stare-off competition. Yeah, Uncle Riz always was a crazy old man, but fearless nevertheless. Bro, come on, back away now," said Dee as calmly as he could. "Just hang on a minute," asked Riz, still with his gun trained at the dogman's eyes, with the eyes locked on him. The dogman then snarled and, drooling, took one step closer toward the house. Riz instantly firing off 2 more rounds at its legs, almost like a warning rather than a direct hit, and it stopped. Then it turned so slowly it was creepy as fuck. It looked directly at me. With this look of pure enjoyment, it opened its mouth wide, so I know all of us could see its enormous canines. God, they had to be at least 5 inches long. Mother by this point was in hysterics. Slowly and surely it turned and began pacing around the house, and then turned and went back the other way, all the while its black piercing eyes locked on me. As it walked, it would make this strange yip sound like a hyena, but different, and we could hear its heavy breathing with a wheeze also. We were trapped in our own home. Dee approached slowly towards his brother as it paced slowly in front of them. Again, it tried to advance the house, but Dee and Riz, firing in response, instantly stopped it. Each time, it would look at them and stare. It was beyond the creepiest behaviour I have ever seen, tilting its head ever so slightly and snapping its jaws at us, but eyes, then always, on me. Then it dawned on everyone like a shovel to the face. It doesn't want them. No, it wants me. As this dawned on everyone, Dad, still holding me, said he was going to get the truck and back up to the house. "Dee, Riz, I need you to give me some cover," he said, with a look of pure desperation painted across his face. But as soon as he said this, for whatever reason, the dogman turned and walked back into the tree line. As it did, Dee and Riz both fired off shots in the air above its head. "It's leaving," said Riz. "Oh, thank God," said Mother. "Wait," said Dad, "look." As we watched it sink back through the thick foliage down into the ravine and towards the creek. "Eyes! I've got eyes!" Pairs of reddish eyeshine suddenly opened all around the tree line, causing even Dad, Riz and Dee to lower their weapons in pure shock. There had to be at least 12 or 15 sets of eyes just within the tree line, some high up in the trees, others on ground level, but all looking directly at us. "What the hell do we do?" said Mother at this incredible and frightening sight unfolded before us. Again, the night was completely silent and still. All we could hear was the heavy bipedal footfall the dogman made as it went back into the tree line, and our own hearts pounding in our ears. Just then, the trees, yes, trees, parted, and this enormous goddamn ugly beast stepped out into the open. still just outside of the spotlights garden. "It's him," said Dad, with a shaken voice and a gulp. "What the fuck?" said the brothers, both perplexed by the sheer sight of the alpha male dogman. As they looked at this giant force of nature, they could see it had many scars from no doubt mating battles against other males, but more evident was the long and gross burns, scarring that ran from its tapered waist up one side to its face. Clearly, this was the very one Father had thrown the oil lantern at and set on fire all those years before. Dee and Riz raised their weapons at the ready. He looked over at them with a look of pure hatred and bad intent. "What do we do now?" screamed Mother. "We don't have a choice. We fight. We stay and fight," said Dee loudly to everyone. "That right there is a walking, eating nightmare. We can't outrun it. It will separate us before we even get to the trucks." "He's right," said Riz. "That there is a Type 3 canine dog, man, and they are not the nicest of dogs. Easily, an alpha like this must weigh 500 to 700 pounds of pure lean muscle. His strength is in his hocks and legs, and they help him cover ground easily and fast. We're talking up to 65 miles per hour. Plus, all that power, he can jump 30 feet plus in no time at all," said Dee. His brother agreeing and adding, "Places like Taylor, Mississippi are crawling with packs of these dogmen. These are, in my opinion, the worst of the worst. Their attitude and ferocity is unmatched. They are skillful and, most of all, vengeful. We definitely have a problem right now," added Riz. Whilst all of this was going on, Dad had rounded up empty bottles, rags and fuel, and was wasting no time in making Molotov cocktails. "It worked before, god damn it's going to work again," he said. The immense dogman growled at a deep, window-shaking growl that we all felt in our chest. I remember my teeth vibrating together slightly from the immense growl. Then it turned and also began pacing back and forth, almost like it was trying to size us up. Dee and Riz both trained their guns on its chest, following it as it did so. Out of nowhere, Dad screamed, "Get the fuck off my property, you demon from hell! I've got more if you want it!" With that, he launched 2 lit bottles at the beast, and they smashed at the ground as the dogman rose back and moved just in time. The flames soared up into the air and across the grass where it had stood. I have to say, I think the old man got the jump on him, because he honestly looked shocked and disgusted that Dad dared to do such a thing to him. And again, yeah, Dad always was a crazy son of a bitch. Riz and Dee both joined and threw 2 more, giving us a sort of divide of fire on the west side of the property. It was a sight to remember. The huge dogman backing away as flames roared upwards, but its enormous height over those flames had it basking in a strange orange and red glow among the pitch black night surrounding our property. "It's moving back," screamed Dad, and with a huge howl it turned and jumped the remaining 15 feet into the tree line. Immediately the other dogmen disappeared into the darkness of the deep ravine. I think we all let out a huge sigh of relief as it did so, followed by the others. We could hear them for what must have been almost 10 minutes, getting further and further away, deeper into the forest, branches being snapped and moans or roars, which I could only guess was them communicating. My mother was in bits and collapsed as soon as they left for the forest. Dad just about caught her before dropping me on my head. Yeah, she was exhausted, and we moved her to the bed soon as, until the next morning. Dee, Riz and Dad all came and sat with me to see how I was doing. After all, it was apparent the only interest they had was with me. Why? We didn't know. Only we could assume it was because Dad had burnt it all those years ago, and also the brothers had killed another of the pack. "We need to get you out of here, and your mother, first light," said Dad. Agreed, said the brothers. But I don't want to, Dad. Come with me then, I said. No, I can't come with you, son. Now you do as you're told, okay? He said with his eyes worried, sick. He's right. You have to go with your mother and keep her safe. Keep her smiling, said Dee. We will take care of this, and before you know it, you can come home and finally be safe, added Riz. The brothers took up guard at the windows again, and Dad tucked a blanket over me on the couch and sat with me, his hand on my head running through my hair like when I was a baby. The fire outside still glowed against the living room wall, dancing flickers of orange light all over it. As I was drifting into sleep after the exhausting night, there was an almighty sound of gunshots, automatic gunshots and large caliber rifles ringing out into the early morning hours, then accompanied by distant roars and growls. I swear I could hear the screaming of men as shot after shot went off. Dad and the brothers looking at each other in horror at the sounds coming from deep in the forest. God damn it, shouted Dad. The brothers now with heads low, shaking from left to right as the screaming died out abruptly, and only the yips and roars could be heard. Then silence.
The sun rose early that morning, casting long, bright rays of light across the land. The birds and other fauna returning as it did so. Everything had this false normality to it, given the nightmare creatures that had been outside only a few hours previous. It wasn't long before the local authorities showed up in the distance, driving up our long driveway to the house, dust bellowing up from behind their vehicles. It was soon to be apparent that these were not the local sheriff department, but rather a government agency of sorts. The typical black SUVs with blackened out windows, no plates. 2 in total. As they approached, Dad instructed me to keep quiet, not to answer anything if they asked. Okay, Dad, I said. As the cars approached, the brothers Dee and Riz, with Dad close behind, went out to the front porch and waited for whoever got out. 2 big black SUVs pulled up. 5 huge men got out of one at the rear. Taking a minute to scan the surrounding tree line and land before 2 more got out of the truck in front. We then opened the door for 2 other men. I could see that the 2 men who got out the last were nothing of the same size as the others. Obviously, they were in charge, and the others were simply the muscle. Asked Dad, staring at one of the gorillas. Yeah, if you're looking for some donuts, you got the wrong place, said Riz. Dee glanced into his brother with disapproval. Come on now, fellas, I think it's us who can help you. Or maybe we can help each other, said the short, stub-nosed guy in the middle. The others remained silent, scanning the area as if looking or searching for something. Oh, really? Said Dad. And how might you be of any help to us? Mr. Monroe, sir. Okay, said Dad. So what can I do you for, Mr. Monroe? Well, we know you boys are having some issues with the local wildlife, and we know 4 or 5 hunters went into forest back there 3 nights ago. We've had reports last night, half a mile down the road here, of automatic gunshots and possibly explosives being used, said Monroe, looking questionably at the brothers and Dad. Ha 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 ha. Dad laughed and said, So you boys thought you would roll up here, start trying to give us a shake-up and see what's up? He continued, I bet you want my men and me to help you traverse the dense dark land in that there ravine and surrounding forest, then find the hunters. Ha! Fat chance, he said with an obvious piss tone to his voice. He continued, Yeah, there were some shots being fired last night. Heavy artillery and a definite, but explosives? I'm not so sure. As he said that, the officer glanced over his shoulder to the now scorched grass, still smouldering away in the morning light. a portion of smoke slowly drifting into the forest, almost like a signal for the men to follow. "I see," said Monroe. "Well, would you mind if my men had a little look around the place, especially down in that ravine, sir?" he asked with a tone of pure excitement. "I hope you know what you're getting yourselves into," said D. "Well, actually, I do mind, sir. I know you are here for those creatures. I tell you now, you and your men go into that forest. You won't come out. At least, not in one piece. You won't find them hunters. From what was heard last night, their ass is grass," said Dad. "Ha ha ha," laughed Monroe, joined by some of his men. "I see, sir. Well, I am just going to have to insist, and thank you, gentlemen, for your time. But we're going in. If we don't, what's, or rather, dear sir, who is going to stop them when they return for the boy?" he remarked, looking directly over to me as I sat with my mother on the steps of our decking. "Hang on, said Dad, but was cut short by Monroe. "No, you hang on, sir. You hang on," said Monroe. "You need our help in this nightmare, and to be honest, we need yours. Nobody knows the land down there better than you. Your family will get full protection in a safe house. What do you say?" asked Monroe, almost as last chance deal. Dad looked at Dee and Riz, then over to Mother and I, throwing his hat to the dusty ground. "God damn it! You get my family out of here and to a safe place, but I want something else. First, I want your snaky little ass down there with us. Then, I want $20,000 in my wife's account by this evening. Lastly, when we get the alpha, I want to be the one who puts a bullet through his head. Are we clear?" he said without any hesitation in his voice. As he was saying this, his men were beginning to put on their body armour and loading out, checking their weapons and rounds, flashbangs, flares. You name it, they had it. One man in particular stood out from the others. He was a man of Native American heritage. He was sat to the side of the dusty ground, sharpening his long hunting knife. Later it would turn out Hawk, as we came to know him by, would save Dee's life and almost lose his own. Monroe chuckled and laughed at the demands Dad had laid out. "Well, looks like you drive a hard deal, sir," he said. "But I tell you what, seeing as I like you boys, it's a deal. But on my terms, you follow our lead. You hear? I don't need you giving away our position before we're ready to cut the beast down to size. Do you understand? And my family, where will you take them?" asked Dad. "We have a base and safe house 30 miles of here. It's not much, but it's secure and habitable," said Monroe. "I give you my word, they will be safe and looked after properly. And before you ask, no, you cannot know who it is we work for. Just know that it's a government agency, and we have the experience with these dogmen," Monroe said with 2 fingers either side to highlight the emphasis of the word dogmen. Out of nowhere, Riz and Dee began laughing and slapping their legs at the man before them. "Ha ha ha! With all due respect, sir," said Dee, "but are you not concerned that you might fall in a puddle and drown? Shit! You must be all of 4 feet tall." "Ha ha ha!" laughed Dee, some of Monroe's men snickering and laughing under their breath. "You say you have done this before?" asked Dad. "Yes, down in New Mexico, sir," said Monroe. "We cleaned out a nesting spot of the mountains down there. The young'uns were attacking illegals and border agents. It was a mess, if I'm honest. We got the job done," said Monroe. "Okay. It looks like you have yourself a deal. As long as that money is here or in the account by this evening," said Dad, looking Monroe straight in his eyes as he did so. "Fantastic. That will not be an issue, sir. I'll see to it that it's there in a few hours. Now, might a few of my men start looking around the bordering field and tree lines? It would be a good idea to get some tripwires and explosives along the tree line and exterior of our immediate land around your house. We need to send an alpha team out first to get some recon whilst it is still daylight hours. Is that going to be a problem? Asked Monroe. Dad nodded in agreement and sighed a heavy sigh. Yeah, get started. I'll be with you in a bit. Sure thing, sir. Take as long as you need. We will just get things moving out here, said Monroe. Then he turned and nodded to one of the men. Clearly a giant of a man, and I'm guessing he didn't even get that position under the terms of his intelligence. But anyway, we'll call him Buck. Mainly because, from what I heard of the man, he liked to say Yeah. You get the idea. So the men started to move out, with some grouping up and heading into the forest direction, whilst the others split and began patrolling the perimeter and tree line. The afternoon passed quickly, and soon the sun was setting and evening approached. Where is the money, Monroe? Said Dad, clearly pissed off. It will be here, sir. Calm yourself and conserve your energy. You're going to need it, responded Monroe. It better, snapped Dad. We're going to have to learn to work with each other on this, dear sir. If you want to survive this shit and see your family again, that is, snapped back Monroe, but in a sly and overly polite manner. Ring, 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 ring. Monroe raises the phone to his ear and stared at Dad. Then, nodding. Wonderful news. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Excellent. Will do. Cheerio. The money is in your wife's account, sir, said Monroe. Dad, looking over at Mother to see her nod her head in agreement. Since you have been so wonderful to work with, if you will help us exterminate these creatures, on return, I will deposit another $50,000 in each of your accounts for your kind services. Oh, and of course, your silence on this terrible, terrible matter. I'm sure you understand why, said Monroe. My family, Mr. Monroe. You need to get them away from here now, said Dad. Yes, you're quite right, sir. Ready when you are. Then Dad called us over, and Uncle D and Riz grabbed our bags and bits and loaded them into the SUV. We said our goodbyes, and soon we were driving off down the large, long, dusty dirt road away from our house. Dad and the brothers fading further away into the distance. Mother and I, if I'm honest, were in pieces and didn't sleep a wink of sleep that night. Hell, any night after we left. From here on is what was told to me by Uncles Riz and D. As soon as sun was almost down, the surrounding areas once again fell into a chasm of silence. Only the odd chatter on a two-way receiver, or cuss from one of the men, because they'd stepped in cow shit. Anyway, before the sun had set, the other teams had dug huge trenches at the tree line and various points closer to the house, but they was far enough away not to damage it or them in any way. They had a series of explosive charges rigged in each trench, with tripwires along the grass and brush. Buck, leader of the beta team, gathered Dad and the brothers over at the SUV and kitted them out with body armour, weapons and ammo. Oh fuck yeah, I almost forgot, said Buck, as he passed a box of Dragon's Breath ammunition. These bad boys will... Yeah, we already know, Buck. Light his ass up, said Dad and the brothers at the same time, then laughing. We're crazy, you know that, declared D to his brother and Dad. Yeah, I guess, said Dad with a nervous chuckle, as the final rays of light dropped across the rolling land in the far distance, and the silhouette trees took on a dark and mysterious atmosphere. The radio from the Alpha team came cutting through the silence that was now surrounding the farm like a vacuum effect or something. It was the Alpha team giving their estimated position and update to what they had encountered or found. Riz said you could feel electricity in the air, almost like nature itself knew tonight blood would be spilt, lives changed. Come in, Commander, come in. Do you read me? Go ahead, Corporal. What is your status? We're about 2 miles of your position. It's pretty dense in here, sir. A lot of thick brush and trees. Everyone is accounted for at present. Over. Monroe, raising his eyebrows at the brothers and Dad, continued. Received. Any updates on the hunting party? Over. Just a few backpacks and some ripped clothing. No blood though. About 1 mile in and above the ravine. Commander, sir. Apparently, Monroe had instructed Dad to pick out some dirty washing and give it to the men in Buck's beta team. The plan was to strategically place them around the field and tree line, hopefully to draw them in, where we could then draw fire on the dogman that approached the bait. Then, by force, move them into the path of one of the explosives. When they did that, there would be an almighty boom. Dogman Doritos. Just then, a long and tremendous howl permeated the night from deep in the forest, followed by a crash as one of the beta team members dropped a box of supplies to the ground. Buck instantly grilling the rookie's ass for his noisy mistake. Uncle Riz thought it was because Buck just about jumped out of his own skin in front of everyone. It didn't go unnoticed. Before setting off, Dad, Riz and Dee sat at the old fire pit, just like they had for so long. You boys, you don't have to do this, you know, said Dad. It's suicide is what it is. What choice do I have? He added. You men have a choice. A chance at something different to this. This nightmare. It's only going to end in blood. Mine or theirs. Dee, looking at his younger brother, now already a marked man in the dogman's eyes, said, Yeah, man, we do have a choice. A chance at something new. Whatever. But that choice, as far as I'm concerned, is to put each one of those man-eaters to sleep for good. For your wife and the boy. Also, in case my arse of a younger brother has forgotten, I'll remind him. Once you piss that son of a bitch off or become of interest, he won't stop hunting you, said Dee. Haha, yeah man, he always did like to roast his younger brother. I guess even as old men in their late 40s, he was still trying to toughen him up a little. Brothers. Anyway, that is correct, my short as fuck older brother. Haha, said Riz. That is correct. But you know as much as I, he needs our help. Susan and Matt need our help. And I guess these hyped up city boys could help too. Said Dad. Do you trust them? Dee shaking his head instantly, Riz agreeing with him. Nope. There is something off about that Monroe. And Buck. Buck won't be a problem, added Dee, cutting his younger sibling off short. Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye on them. Stick together at all times. Absolutely, sir, said the brothers. Then let's do this, said Dad. And they all got up and grabbed their gear, heading off towards the tents that was now base for operations over by the SUV, each of them given a nod of its go time. As they crossed the front of the house, a distant pop went off. Just the one. Then a flare could be seen riding up into the clear night sky. Stars everywhere and a green flare filling and falling back down before extinguishing back to blackness. Ah, excellent, said Monroe. Alpha Team has located a body or something of great interest, but must be unable to get any signal in the ravine on the two-way. Dad, Riz and Dee looked at each other with a look of dread of what awaits them in there, in that deep, dark forest, in its home. Buck, standing with Monroe like some fucking guard dog. Are we ready to go or what? Demanded Dad. Ha ha, yes, we are good to go, old chap. Are you sure you and your men are up to the task? He said, with a sly grin on his pasty, pale face, eyes as devious as a dogman's. Monroe did or said nothing. He just stood and stared. It was becoming apparent and clear dear Monroe had an issue or two, and only time would tell which way this would go. Dee, given as much thought and input to his posture and response to this clear challenge of egos, then said but one sentence before all hell broke loose between them. Monroe, one question, dog. Annabelle or Dianabole? Motherfucker! Monroe flew into a fit at this dig, clearly being a heavy user of steroids, but not the type to admit it. Yeah? D punched him straight in the fucking throat as he lunged at him. The throat. Oh, man. Anyway, where were we? Yes. So after D kicked Monroe's ass and sent Riz into a laughing fit for 10 minutes, even Dad laughed, the men made their way into the forest, down the trail to the ravine. From here onwards, it was nothing but pine trees for nearly 35 miles squared. A few lakes, but the entire area and further afield had vast systems of caves and tunnels. Dad and the brothers wondered if Monroe and his team knew about the caves. Just then, the signal to move out was given to the Beta team, and Dad, D and Riz followed close behind. As they neared the tree line, another long, loud roar or howl left the forest darkness. A foreboding feeling sat in each man's stomach as the foliage and entire pitch-black forest consumed them, thick with thorny brush and branches obstructing their path. It was not quite the entrance they had hoped for even when the Alpha team had already made their way through, it was like the forest had regrown, ultimately consuming whoever dared to enter it. As the howling died out slowly, the men began walking again, trying their best not to trip or twist an ankle. 40 minutes in. By now, they had reached the opening of the ravine, and ahead they could see the ground fall away, giving place to a long but equally wide sea of trees, a canopy of vast leaves covering the journey ahead. Beautiful as it was in the daytime, now it was night, and predators are hungrily looking for a meal. Everyone knew what was laying in wait for them. It was more of a matter of when rather than if. Hours later, after making slow progress through the thick brush, the men came to a clearing of sorts. "Any word from Alpha Team?" asked Dad. "Nothing since we left base," said Buck. "Okay, isn't that a little concerning?" asked Dad. "No, it probably just this damn ravine knocking out communications," said Buck. "Let's fucking hope so, eh?" said D. Riz and Dad both muttering to themselves and shaking their heads in disapproval, trudging on further into the immense forest, further from safety, further from home. It was approaching 11 or 12 at night by now, and still there was no word from the Alpha Team at all. Then they came upon an area of trees and brush that was flattened, and the bark on the trees stripped off in long shreds. Clearly the work of a four-clawed beast. The unsettling thing was, some of these markings were 8 or 10 feet up the trunks, and deep. "You seeing this, Monroe?" said Dad. "You know bears round here don't get big enough to do this," he added. Yes, I see that, sir. Let's keep moving until we meet up with Alpha Team. It shouldn't be much longer," said Monroe, sounding a little more concerned than before they had left. Further on, a few hundred meters or so, they discovered a small cave entrance. Not much of a cave by any cave standards, but clearly it was being used regularly by something large, something that would just about fit into the mouth of the cave. Prints and hair samples were taken. 2 prints, clearly with long claws, were at least 13 to 14 inches long and around 7 or 8 wide. Monroe sent one of the team to take a closer look at the entrance and just inside the cave. Instantly, the Native American Beta team member Hawk immediately protested against this, but was silenced by Buck and sent to keep watch up ahead of the group. As the younger team member, Dan, I believe his name. Anyway, as Dan lowered himself into the mouth of that cave, there was a dull and heavy thump from within, followed by some smaller rocks or pebbles. Dan, head just above the entrance, face dropped as he hung half in and half out the cave. "What do you see, Private?" said Buck. There was a long pause. Only his harness and climbing gear could be heard creaking or rubbing against the cold, hard rock. Came this ground-shaking noise booming from the cave. Dan's little face pulled this squirming look of pure terror. "Ah!" he screamed as a loud footfall came crashing from the cave. As he madly tried to clamber and climb his way out of there, there was a crunch, followed by a wet tearing, and Private Dan's screams. Next, as he was clinging by his hands and chin, also hooked as if trying to gain leverage out of that blackness, an enormous and long-fingered claw rose up above Dan's right shoulder, and then came crashing down onto his shoulder, digging its claws under his collarbone. Then he disappeared. Gone. Just his dying screams fading as whatever grabbed him then proceeded to drag him down further into the inky blackness of the cave. Buck and a few others running over and sprayed a hail of bullets into the cave behind him. I seriously hope one put him out of his misery before that creature got its teeth into him. Poor sod. Just great, shouted D and Riz, followed by Dad. You might as well put on neon lights saying, feast, all you can eat, you lummox. They're going to hear that for miles. Now they know we're here. D was right. Those shots would have carried throughout the whole system, amplified by the cavernous cave. Shut the hell up whining, said Buck. Why don't you try and make me, said D. And with that, Buck charged at Uncle D as if to spear him, but was met with D's favourite uppercut to his chin, losing a couple of teeth and, in the process, his consciousness. Ha ha! Slump. Dumbass, laughed Riz. Shut up, said his brother. All right, that's enough of that. Someone pick up his fat ass and get moving. Now, said Monroe. Two guys rushed over and picked him up, dragging his feet behind as they all continued up the trail. Dad, Riz and D were all looking at each other and shaking their heads. A while later, the terrain became very jagged and slippery, and the ravine walls closed in either side to a much more narrow path. Buck was back with the world and cussed under his breath at the embarrassing knockout. D, suddenly surveying the area ahead, stopped, then grabbed his brother's arm as he almost passed by. Dad, coming up behind, asked what was up. This is an ambush point. Look at the walls either side. They're covered in scratches. Scratches from prey trying to flee an impossible predator, and in an even more impossible area of escape. Shit! Hey guys! Dad called to the other men. As he did, one of the scouts from up ahead came rushing back, immediately reporting to Monroe and whispering in his ear. Monroe's face dropped 1,000 feet to the floor. Dad rushed over. What is it? He said. We need to find another route through. This is clearly an ambush point, man, Dad screamed at Monroe. The other men now stopped awaiting order, looking up at each other and each side of the ravine and around the trees. Some of Alpha Team's clothing and body parts were spotted about 500 metres up the trail, said Monroe to Dad, with a look of astonishment and worry painted on his face. Now, he really got what was going on here. Now, he realised this wasn't an ordinary pack of dogmen. No. Now, he realised they were vicious, man-eating dogmen. A pack at that, and clearly they had foot soldiers and a leader in place. A true pack living in this deep wilderness of vast green. Dad, looking at Monroe, said, You see? They ain't playing around up here. I heard the stories, but this pack, they are different. They are hunting out humans as food. Just then, an almighty crash and roar broke the conversation as Dad looked over to see the young rookie being dragged down. Yes, down, back into the earth through a new created hole in the rocks and soil. His body like a ragdoll to whatever had hold of him. Then, he was gone. It was a moment of blind panic as the beta team scrambled in all directions. Monroe, rigid with fear and firing off his weapon with his goddamn eyes closed. He ended up downing 3 of his own team as he sprayed and prayed until click, 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 empty. As he looked in horror at his scene of madness and amateur reactions, he turned to Dad and the brothers. Shit, it was an accident. You all see what happened, right, guys? Said Monroe, looking pasty and about ready to go home. Unknown to everyone, from behind Monroe, a pair of glinting eyes appeared from a small opening in the ravine wall. Then, long, black hairy arms with claws extended on each long bony finger wrapped around each of his legs before the horror flashed across his face. Looking at Dad and the brothers, then his team, and just managing a strange meh sound before whoosh, he was dragged off his feet with a crack down to his chin on the hard, unforgiving ground, and then pulled with a great force back into the opening in the ravine wall. His screams of pure fright in the chaos and flapping he did before, disappearing like the other. A small pocketbook fell from his jacket, landing near Riz. As he almost was gone, Buck put a bullet straight through his head. I guess as a pity on the poor man. There was a deep growl from within, as if the dogman was annoyed that Buck had ruined its fun. A second or two later it was joined by more growling and a large roar or scream. The men all moved out, back in the direction they had came, back towards the farm. If they were quick, they could be there by sunup. It was around 1:45 a.m. now. They just had to keep moving. Even Buck wasn't complaining, which was strange. Then an almighty howl rang out through the pitch black forest. The nightmare was far from over. As they picked up pace, they started to hear branches and trees snapping and cracking off in the distance. Not far, but far enough to keep everyone moving at an abnormal pace. Sweat, dirt and blood clinging to their clothing as they're trudging back through the humid forest. A fog starting to rise in the early morning hours, making visibility very, very poor. Every sound, every crunch became a dogman. Soon, they had made good ground, and the ravine was widening again. They came up on a slight hill as they were surrounding a long bend. They must have been at least a mile from the ambush site. Yet, as they walked around that bend one by one, they gasped, and then a couple even threw up. There, before them, was Alpha Team, and Monroe with his 3 murdered soldiers, all laying or impaled on various branches on different trees, their heads with broken jaws gaping wide open, throats ripped out and devoured, legs of some again half eaten or half missing, the stomach of each man with a clean slice running down the stomach until his insides fell to the floor. "Just like Brett!" exclaimed Riz and D. Their friend who had thrown his bottle at the dogman was found in a similar way, all except the bottle smashed into his mouth part. But still, textbook. "We must keep moving," said Dad. Buck still cleaning vomit off of his boot. "Agreed," said Buck. They pressed on, taking one last glance at the horrendous sight before them, some men still heaving at the smell and visual bloody buffet. It was now clear these creatures can easily move much quicker, and still, whilst carrying a dead body from where the ambush had taken place, they managed to cut around the group of men and set up this parade of gore, and set the level of intimidation to maximum. They had to get out, and fast. Maybe they can make it back, and the bait charges will take them out, they thought. Just then, the howl came again. Still, just one enormous and sternum-rattling, booming howl. It was apparently a sort of mix between a walrus and a wolf. There was also a human-like pitch to it as well. Either way, it made all of them start fast walking, some of the men breaking into a light jog. "Stick together! Stick together! You damn idiots!" screamed D. The men not listening soon disappeared round a slight bend. Then the gunshot started. The rest of the men running to catch up rounded the bend just in time to see one man being dragged up a large pine tree, the other on his knees facing them, a dogman behind him with its hand wrapped over the top of his head. It was almost like this creature had waited for the men, Dad, Riz and D, to all round that corner and see just how powerful and terrifying it truly is. It growled and snapped its jaws at the men. D took aim, as did his brother. Within seconds, the dogman howled and pulled his squirming man's head clean off, throwing it to the grassy side of the trail like a discarded Big Mac. D and Riz opened fire simultaneously, hitting the target square in the chest. It paced back a few steps and then came charging for them. Just then, Hawk stepped in front of the men and charged the dogman. The others could not believe what they were seeing. "No, no!" they shouted, as Hawk and the dogman just engaged. Hawk dropped and slid to his legs under the now jumping dogman. In his slide, he pulled a long sword and in one fluid motion severed its right leg from its knee down. The dogman howled in agony and came crashing down before scrambling to get up. It was too late, as Dad unloaded his 357 directly into its stomach and hind, the rest of the team keeping watch on the trees as Hawk then calmly walked over and raised his sword, and with a thwack, bringing his sword down across both of its forearms, slicing cleanly through the bone and muscle. With a final shot from Dad, and Hawk rammed his sword straight through the top of its skull with a messy wet slop. "It's done. Let's move now," said Hawk, and they all pressed on, now keeping a constant watch of the trees surrounding them. It was out there, just where? It was fast approaching 4:30 a.m. and they had covered good ground, but were losing men fast and exhaustion was taking its toll. As the men rounded one last bend in the dark forest trail, light could be seen like a tunnel ahead. It was the farm, and the dawning day sunlight was already beginning to raise across the safety of the farmland. "Look," said Dad. "The farm! We're going to make it," said Riz to his brother. Buck, now dragging his fat ass at the back, literally lit up like the sun himself when he see it. "My God, thank you, Jesus," he remarked. "We are far from out of the hot water, gentlemen. We still need to secure the farmhouse. Then, we got to kill them. Let's hope they take those baits. And we piss them off enough to come back tonight. They have got to pay us a visit." "Yeah," said Dad. "But this time, it's on our land, our home, on our terms." Crashing through the back door of the farmhouse, the men all rushed to secure the windows, doors, hell, everywhere. All furniture was tossed up against the exposed windows in an attempt to protect themselves. Eventually, silence once again fell in the house as they all took a position and stared back at the tree line. 2 men at the front, 2 at the back. Dad went thumping up the stairs after the brothers, who by now were up on the roof. Dee and Riz's eyes were to the far tree line, awaiting the vicious creatures to come storming out of the brush and branches of the trees. It was a long and eerie, quiet wait. Nothing but the breeze and their recovering breaths. The sun had now risen high in the sky, making it a hot and humid day. There was a strange but definite anxiety looming over each man's mind as they kept a relentless watch on the surrounding lands. "Why didn't they follow?" said Dad. "They were supposed to follow and hit the tripwires. We're sitting ducks. We're stuck like this," he added. "I don't know, but we still have that element of surprise. We just got to pray that it takes enough of them out before they reach the house," said Dee. Riz was studying the small black notebook Monroe had dropped just before he was dragged back and underground. "Little snake," said Riz with a shocked tone. "He was planning on capturing a male and female. Says here, 2 weeks ago. We had word of a cattle herd being slaughtered. Agency on scene. Flying out tomorrow. It appears to be a pack rather than just a rogue, given the 50 head of cattle torn to pieces. Looks like he's back. Or possibly he's young. We'll update Chief in the morning." "Oh my God. He was going to capture and then breed these monsters. What the hell were these people?" said Riz angrily, with Monroe for his deception. "Oh well, looks like he found his alpha," said Dee, with Dad laughing along. Suddenly it wasn't funny, as Dad realised Mum and I were at some unknown safe house, 30 odd miles away. Surely there would be reinforcements as soon as they hear no word from Monroe or Buck, he thought. They headed back into the house and began demanding to know where we were being kept and if anyone else was coming. They was met with mumbles and a simple answer. Yes, there will be more men coming, sir. As to when, I can't tell you. Our communications are broken and down. But I'm sure they're fine. Don't panic, sir, said the soldier, seemingly trying to take up the now vacant position of who was in charge. Eventually, after Dad had gotten some anger and stress out on the men, he headed back up onto the roof to cool off and keep watch. Dee and Riz taking watch outside on the deck. Hawk remained quiet outside, walking backwards and forwards on the front deck. The sun was soon setting in the cool evening, casting long black shadows across the meadow around the house from the dark tree line. You think they would come tonight, brother? Said Riz, while staring off to the forest. I don't know, brother. I guess we can only wait and see. Just then, Hawk stepped back onto the deck and sat with the brothers. Hawk, man, how can you be running with these fools? Said Dee. I mean, it's obvious that you're the only one who has experience with these creatures. Not to mention, you know how to wield a blade. He chuckled. Hawk eyed the brothers over and said, Yes, I have faced these hunters before. My people have lived alongside the Dogman for many, many years. Since the time of my ancestors to the present day, the battle never stops. He said this with a deep and serious tone to his voice. So they can be stopped? Asked Dee excitedly. No, not stopped, but possibly moved on, for a temporary period at least. But they do always return. Which is great, shouted Dee, furious with the whole situation. War was unavoidable now. It had already begun. Now we prepare. Now you fight for your home. You fight for his family and your life, said Hawk. It was now becoming clear that Hawk was a man of great knowledge and heart. He went on to explain that he was forced to assist these assholes, or they were going to ruin him. They had even threatened to kill his family in the most cruel way. When he finished, his head bowed to the floor, watching a line of ants scurry along the nest in the grass as it swayed in a humid, light breeze. The brothers Dee and Riz were outraged by this and started to cuss and tell Hawk not to worry. They will help him get his family back. Just then, Dad came back out onto the porch, shocked at the news that he had just overheard, and then sickened by the thought he had actually packed us off to an unknown location with complete lunatics who had no concern about slicing somebody's throat open. What have I done? He screamed. Just then, there was a loud crack from the forest, followed by two more. Then they could see the canopy of the trees falling down to the surrounding forest floor, birds desperately rushing out of the canopy and fleeing whatever that was. But they all knew it could only be one thing, as they all very, very well knew. The tops of the trees then swaying erratically as one after the next was followed from both left and right. They were coming. The night sky would soon be fully black, but it no longer mattered. These hungry beasts were ready for war, and they were ready right now. There was an almighty deep howl that erupted as suddenly the tree line was breached and the pack descended to the property. A loud series of explosions went off all around the tree line and land as dogman after dogman came crashing through the brush and trees. Some bipedal, others on all fours, as the men reacted and set about unleashing hell across the land. For those who didn't trip the explosives, there were deep pits with stakes in the bottom, covering the surrounding land. The loud and almost human-like screams of those dogmen who fell into them, nearly drowning out all of the loud bullet storm that was taking place. Riz was up on the roof with Dee and Dad. Riz was taking aim and taking out dogmen who had got through the traps and explosives with a sniper rifle and a ballistic tip ammunition. D settled for the M4 carbine, and Dad a 30-06 rifle, again both with harder hitting ballistic tips. For a while it was working. The numbers were dropping like flies, but there couldn't be many more explosives left. "Where's the Alpha? I don't see him," said Dad, staring at the horizon. Just then, an awful, blood-curdling screaming erupted from downstairs inside the house, followed by gunshots as Monroe's men desperately trying to get a large black dogman off one of the men in the back of the house. Apparently, it had smashed through the window and landed right on this soldier's back, the sheer weight of this creature swamping the man as they both fell to the floor and rolled, the dogman biting down with its huge canines directly into his neck, sending a fountain of blood up the room walls and eventually draining out across the beige carpet. As it swiped its giant claws at the fellow men towering above them, it snarled and growled as their shots seemingly hitting their target but not having any effect. "Aim for the chest and abdomen! Aim for the chest!" screamed D, and he, Dad and Riz came thumping downstairs, just in time for one last shot to ring out. Then, silence. Silence, except for the heavy, wheezing breaths the creature made from the back of the house. Dad, Riz and D nodded at each other and slowly stepped closer down the hall towards the kitchen door. Gunsmoke eerily creeping from the sides of the ajar door.
Thump, thump, thump.
They could hear as it moved around the kitchen, cups and plates all around smashing, nails clicking on the tiles as the dogman took each giant step. As they kicked the kitchen door open, then opened fire, the dogman roared and smashed into the kitchen counter, then lunged at Riz. Riz took a slash from the dogman's immense clawed hands, its freakish, bony long fingers cutting through his shirt like a hot knife to butter. Riz fell to the floor as hot pain surged through his body. The dogman quickly pouncing on top of him, smashing and clawing madly like the wild animal it was. D screamed, "No!" and charged at the dogman, attacking his little brother, who lay helplessly on the kitchen floor, bits of his flesh, skin and clothing coming off in ribbons as it continued its assault. Riz managed to stick the barrel of his gun into its huge jaws as it desperately attempted to try and bite at his face. D came crashing into the dogman's side with his hunting blade jamming into its neck as he tackled the enormous beast. And it worked, as he and the dogman flew over and into the wall of the kitchen with a loud crunch. The dogman's jaw collided with the hard wall, breaking one of its canines clean off. D jumped to his feet and was just about to pick up his M4 carbine and fill it with hot lead when an almighty roar came booming from outside. All three men turned just in time to see the Alpha running on 2 feet a mere couple of meters away. By now, the other dogman had gotten back to its feet as it roared in unison right into D's face. He managed to sucker punch it before the unthinkable happened. As D screamed and started to fire his weapon through the window at the approaching Alpha, it jumped head first through the window and surrounding wall. With an enormous blast of rubble and glass, it crashed through directly at D. He had zero time to react as its sheer mass engulfed him, and they both flew through the adjoining wall behind D. Dad and Riz both opened fire on the first dogman. As it had jumped for Dad, he jammed the M4 into its open mouth and unloaded the rest of the bullets. This sent brain and skull fragments bursting out the back of the dogman's head, dropping it instantly to the floor with a loud and tremendous thud. D began screaming as the Alpha bit down on his bicep as he covered his face and neck. Blood again spraying from the devastating wounds inflicted. As it was on top, it stopped and reached its enormous arm and clawed hand high above D, with a look of pure violence and enjoyment in its large black eyes. It brought it down, aiming for his head, only, I can imagine, to smash his face and skull to a pulp. But at this very moment, Hawk came running through Dad and Riz, who was still partially on the floor, jumping as he got closer and bringing his large hunting blade down into the Alpha's forearm, cutting again straight through its limb and severing it off completely. The Alpha roared in agony and turned in pure shock, taking 1 second to look at its stump of a limb. Blood squirted in heavy flows on and off. "Go! Go! Go! Get to the car! I will hold them off as long as I can," screamed Hawk. Dad nodded as he still remained firing on the Alpha as it fell and stumbled from the attack and blood loss. Dad grabbed Riz and D dragged himself off the floor as the three men made their way out the front of the truck. The roars and screaming of the Alpha echoing out the front door. Hawk could be heard shouting in his native tongue as Dad fired up the truck and was blowing a horn for Hawk to come. 2 more dogmen rounded the corner of the house. One was considerably larger than the other, at a huge 8 feet tall. Again, this one had those cold, killer black eyes. The other appeared female and only stood around 6 feet or so. The big one, he was jet black colour, the same as the Alpha, while she had a more grey ash colour to her fur, with red or amber eyes. Either way, they were heading straight for the truck. Riz by now was in and out of consciousness after losing so much blood. Dee screamed, "It's okay, little brother. You're strong. It's just a scratch. Come on, come on! Come on, don't you die on me!" He screamed. Just then, Hawk came running out of the house and jumped the steps off the porch. Dad gave him some cover fire and sprayed a hail of bullets at the male and the female as they turned to attack him. Soon, he was followed by him, the Alpha. Hawk just entered the truck as Dad hit the gas, sending gravel up into the air as it launched the truck as fast as it would permit him. The Alpha roared and gave chase, closely followed by the other 2 dogmen. "We need to go faster!" Dee was screaming as Dad pushed his old Bronco to its limits, sliding out of the property and onto the game trail. "Where are we going?" screamed Dee. "We have to end this now," said Dad. "We can lead him to the boathouse on the lake. It's about 1.5 miles from here." The speedometer climbing to 65 miles per hour as they slid round bends in the trail, all the while the dogman close on their tails. The truck taking an immense beating from the brush as it whipped and crashed against the body and windows of the truck. "Do you see him?" said Dad. No, I don't think so," said Dee. Wait there," added Hawk as he pointed to the treetops swaying violently back and forth towards their direction. It's him, said Dad, looking into his wing mirror. Just then, the old boathouse came into view. It was old, but it was strong, built many years before by loggers for storage and a workshop. It's the only idea I've got, but it might just work. There was a small boat down the jetty. We need to trap them inside somehow. There should be enough fuel and chemicals in that building. Hopefully some old aviation fuel from the seaplanes. That should help blow them sky high, said Dad. Dee and Hawk nodded. Okay, sounds like a plan, said Dee. Apparently, as they approached, the truck came screaming over a crest of dirt and launched into the air in a dramatic Dukes of Hazzard-esque way, said Uncle Dee, chuckling as he remembered that fateful night. They didn't have long as the tree branches breaking and snapping in the distance grew louder and louder, accompanied with the familiar yips and haunting roars as the violent beasts came closer and closer. Get him down to the boat, said Dad to Dee as the men jumped out of the Bronco and began running for the boathouse. Dee nodded and said to my father, "I will be right back, you crazy old man. You better save some of the action for me, you hear?" Dad shot him a smile and grabbed his hand and then said, "Go now." Hawk was inside tipping over chemicals and fuel drums as Dad ran into the boathouse and shut the door. He saw them coming, like a pack of hungry wild dogs jacked up on meth. They burst through the canopy of the trees, each landed with a massive thud on the dirt. Dee had just made it to the boat. He said he even felt it, even out on the jetty, the large, dull thump, as 3 enormous bipedal creatures landed and began searching for Dad and Hawk. Soon, they picked up on the scent and they descended on the boathouse. Beating the old wooden walls as the Alpha howled another bone-shaking guttural howl. Then, as it thumped its way round our boathouse, growling and sniffing loudly, it ran its clawed fingers horizontally across the boathouse walls with a horrendous grinding or scratching noise as it did so. The other 2 took to the roof, trying to breach it from above. Dee said he sat there with his brother wrapped in an old woolen blanket. He was grey and dead looking already from blood loss. He watched as the small back service door opened. Thinking Dad was going to come running out, he sat up. But then Hawk came running at breakneck speed, jumping straight into the lake and swimming for dear life as the dogmen all turned attention to the mad attempt of an escape. And then back to the open door. "What the hell is he doing?" said Dee to himself as he watched Hawk get closer and closer, swim through the low-laying blanket of fog on the moonlit lake surface. He watched as the 3 dogmen rounded the corner and down off the roof towards the open door. Still, no sign that Dad was coming. The dogmen slowly creeped to the entrance, moaning and snapping at each other, but still clearly the Alpha was in charge. Then they entered. Uncle Dee's face dropped as each one disappeared into the boathouse darkness. Just then gunshots erupted as Dad ran out from behind barrels near the doorway, desperately trying to get to the doorway, but he tripped and fell and hit his face hard on the cold hard floor. Dazed and bloody, he tried to get back up, but it was too late. Uncle Dee never told me what happened next until really a few years ago, when I was old enough to understand why he did what he did. As Dad was trying to get to his feet and away from these monstrous beasts surrounding him, it happened. The Alpha, reaching down, grabbed him by the leg, up off the floor, like a damn ragdoll, and then threw him to the boathouse wall with a tremendous crunch. The other 2 pounced on him and began tearing and mauling him like a damn chew toy. "No!" screamed Dee, as he could do nothing but watch this nightmare unfold in graphic detail. Hawk started the motor on the small boat. Dee shot him a teary glance of pure terror and heartache. Then, as he glanced back to see Dad half in and out of the door, he said that is when Dad made an almighty scream. It was like one last primal, age-old human war cry as Dad cursed words that I cannot repeat here. Reaching for his gun, he aimed and fired. Boom! The whole boathouse exploded, lifting it high right off the foundations. Smoke, rubble and wood flying high up into the night sky with a huge orange fireball and glow breaking through the pitch black night's darkness. "No! No! That's not what was supposed to happen!" said Dee, with Riz now back into consciousness, confused and in need of immediate medical assistance. Hawk opened the throttle up on the small boat as they all headed out on the lake towards the next town, over 2 miles down the lakeside. Did we make it? Did we win? Said Riz, looking up to his older brother above him. Yeah, bro. We made it. We won. Get some rest, and I'll wake you when we get to a hospital, okay? Get some rest, said Dee. As the men drive further away from the boathouse, a huge orange glow came from the fire. In the pitch dark night, casting strange shadows on the back of the lake and nearby tree line. One very deep, low growl erupted from the forest behind the fire. Was that the alpha? No. It sounded different. But how? Thought Dee. I think it's his son. The new alpha. This is not over. But he will be gone for a while. Whilst he is, no doubt, healing and regrows his pack. It's just what they do. The Type 3D is never satisfied and always hungry. He will remember us all and return someday, said Hawk. Dee looked at his brother Riz, who now slept from sheer exhaustion and wounds, then over at Hawk. Without any words, the men nodded in agreement. Bring them on, said Dee angrily. Bring them on. Wow. I hope you guys have enjoyed this series as much as I have writing it. Really incredible experience. Your feedback support has been really humbling and amazing. I never ever expected any of this type of feedback at all. I can't thank you guys enough. Also, it's just been a wonderful experience penning down a story. I haven't wrote probably since I had to in school, so that's my level of writing. But I really do appreciate everything you've said to me, whether it be negative feedback or positive. It's been wonderful. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Of course, please do let me know down below. As ever, please do like and share. If you haven't subscribed to DMT to join the family, please smash the subscribe button and the notification bell to stay up to date with all DMT content. And remember guys, if you're taking a trip to the land between the lakes, remember, above all, be safe, not sorry.